Thunder Dragon Druk Yul is both the name of Bhutan and its national symbol seen on the flag the country adopted in 1969. The small Buddhist kingdom consists of mountains and valleys landlocked at the eastern end of the Himalayas, between China to the north and India to the south. Never colonized in history, and an absolute monarchy from 1907 to 2008, its rulers converted Bhutan in 2008 into a constitutional monarchy. Bhutan is said to be the happiest country in the world, the last Shangri-La. That is, a mystical and harmonious valley, a mythical Himalayan utopia, and an earthly paradise well symbolized by its beautiful flowers. Progress is measured in Bhutan in terms of gross national happiness, an indicator included in their new constitution by the good-humored descendants of fierce warriors that defines the quality of life in holistic terms. And people show their happiness when a camera is pointed at them. Smoking is not allowed anywhere in the country, even if in recent years cases of drug abuse have been increasing. The promotion of religions other than Buddhism is not permitted. Television channels deemed not to promote happiness are banned, as Bhutanese law is founded on the principle of gross national happiness. And all attorneys must be persons of integrity and good character. There is relatively little crime in Bhutan and no NRA, though petty misconduct such as purse snatching is occasionally reported. Yet, even though health care is provided free of charge, Bhutan's social indicators such as literacy, life expectancy, or infant mortality are among the lowest in the world. The only jet of Druk Air, or Royal Air Bhutan, one of the two airlines allowed to fly into the country, lands at the only Bhutan airport in Paro Valley after tight turns around the local mountains until it manages to align itself with the landing strip visible from the plane's windows as it completes its last swirl. The first thing that strikes on arrival at Bhutan short before sunset is the serene beauty of restful valleys and of misty mountains that reach beyond 23,000 feet. Bhutan has often been compared to its larger neighbor, Nepal, west, for its beautiful scenery at the foot of the highest mountains in the world, for its economy relying almost exclusively on agriculture, and more particularly on rice production, and for the major role played by religion, Buddhism in Bhutan and mostly Hinduism in Nepal, both of which have divinities that are quite open-minded concerning amorous behavior. However, the natural resources of Bhutan, ranked among the top 10 countries in the world for its biodiversity, are largely intact, and two-thirds of the country are under protected forest, whereas wood is increasingly hard to find in Nepal, where the population density is 5 times that of Bhutan. The takin, a rare species of goat antelope covered in a thick fleece that turns dark on the underbelly, is the national animal of Bhutan. Possibly a symbol of sexual equality, horns are found in both male and female takins. Otherwise, all of nature is alive with the supernatural in Bhutan. Tourists are requested not to throw stones into lakes out of respect for the various deities and demons believed to live beneath the waters. The early history of Bhutan remains obscure, though there are indications that people have lived in the region for the past 11,000 years. Bhutan's recorded history started with the introduction of Tibetan Buddhism in the 8th century. Small independent monarchies then began to develop in Bhutan, but its unification had to wait until the 17th century after an incursion by the Mongols who had occupied Tibet was successfully repulsed. Ubiquitous dzongs all around the country bear witness both to its turbulent past and to the unifying impact of Buddhism. Viewed as a symbol of national independence, dzongs illustrate Bhutanese paper currency. For a long time, each warring faction had built its own dzong to house its monks and protect its population from surrounding enemies. The dzongs are military fortresses as well as religious, administrative, and social centers. Towering walls, inward sloped as a precaution against frequent earthquakes, surround a complex of courtyards, temples, administrative offices, and monks' accommodations. Dzongs have no specific architectural plan. Each was built according to the inspiration of a high spiritual leader or lama, relying on visions and omens, and using labor provided by the local population during the slow months of the agricultural year in lieu of taxes. Their ground floors, always painted in white, have no windows but massive doors. Dzongs were erected at strategic locations such as mountain spurs, with a small dzong or watchtower directly uphill to keep the slope clear of attackers. They are also found by river shores, and more particularly at the confluence of two rivers, more because of the spiritual implications of water for the Bhutanese than because of any strategic importance of river transport in a mountainous country. Even where bridges spanning over them are not complemented with roads. Ringpung Dzong by the Para River is credited with having provided an effective defense against Tibetan invaders. As the legend goes, a lama cut planks in the forest, uttered a mantra, and the planks shifted to the construction site of the dzong on their own. 5 Bhutan dzongs are in a tentative list of UNESCO World Heritage Sites. Dzong roofs were traditionally built without nails in massive hardwood and bamboo, now replaced by galvanized iron. All doors have thresholds to discourage the entrance of spirits, which it would seem are not able to rise above the threshold. Not all Bhutan fortifications have such colorful designs. Some stand out by the austerity of their lines, but project strength and determination. The houses of relatively rich families display the same wood carvings and colors as the dzongs, as required by local regulations, but facade ornaments are often little more than superficial makeup. Most buildings are open at the eaves to ensure proper ventilation. More recent constructions display glass windows, not only in richer urban areas, but also in more rural areas out on the hills. The less affluent villages do not bother to improve their looks by adding colors and other designs, even if their ground floors, sometimes reserved for animals, remain painted white. Bhutan is the only place south of the Himalayas where Tibetans have settled. They represent two-thirds of the local population. Most of the others are Hinduists, even though many were expelled in the latter part of the 20th century, many of which are said to still live in concentration camps in Nepal, notwithstanding the lack of laborers in Bhutan for field work and major infrastructure projects. With diplomatic representation limited to India and the United Nations in the 20th century, and still not extended to the USA, UK, or France, Bhutan remains, on purpose, as politically isolated from the rest of the world as it is geographically. It long preferred not to accept American aid for fear of adopting the American way of life, even though aid was much needed. In 1997, its capital, Thimphu, boasted a population of some 30,000, plus a king known to mingle informally with his subjects and his four wives, who happened to be sisters but who lived in separate palaces. Thimphu also had one supermarket and a movie theater showing Hollywood productions. A traffic cop elegantly waved along the cars at the main intersection of the only capital in the world that has no traffic lights. Traffic lights had been installed there at one time, but were removed when the population expressed its frustration with them. 20 years later, the population of Thimphu had risen above 110,000. Paro is the second largest town of Bhutan, right next to the airport. Its main street of traditional architecture has richly decorated family homes that also house small shops. A building in Bhutan might have shops on the ground floor, a hotel held by Indian owners that offers strictly vegetarian fares on the next two floors, and residential quarters on the penthouse. Bhutan's regulations reduce publicity to a simple sign at the shop's window, summarily stating the nature of the business. However, under the influence of foreign businesses, publicity placards can now be seen on some shop fronts, and credit cards start being accepted. As the shop and the residence of its owner are usually in the same building, trade is conducted at the window, with the customer standing outside in the street. Until 2006, a merchant was required to obtain a separate license for each product he sold. Bhutan roads consisted only of mule trails until the second half of the 20th century. Roads now frequented by tourists are better paved. Tourists started being admitted to Bhutan in limited numbers in 1974, 3 years after the country joined the United Nations. The road linking the western cities of Paro, Thimphu, and Punakha, the capital of Bhutan until 1955, meanders along a river. At Wangdur, not far from Punakha, visitors are repeatedly reminded to keep the town clean. Road construction is proceeding at a relatively swift pace, using for that purpose Indian companies and Nepalese workers. Bhutan imported stones from India for its road projects, but facing increasing demand, it has been developing its own resources. Hydroelectricity accounts for half of Bhutan's exports, and all the areas the few tourists get to visit are provided with electricity. Speed on Bhutan roads is limited to 25 miles per hour, 15 in the cities, and accidents are rare. After all, motorized transport is rather rare, even if scooters and motorcycles are now more abundant. Pedestrian bridges built over deep and narrow valleys substantially reduce the time it takes villagers to walk to town and back. With so many mountains and steep slopes, only 8% of Bhutan is arable, and rice paddy has a thirst for water that can only be quenched with irrigation. The fields need to be kept perfectly terraced. The seedlings have to be transplanted at a time in their growth, and harvesting must be done by hand, often with imported labor. The government maintains a monopoly for the import of fertilizers, providing it to farmers at a subsidized price. With its shortage of hands and of arable land, Bhutan is not self-sufficient in food production. It needs to import grains and cereals, mostly from India. In urban districts, the Bhutanese find in open-air markets the food they cannot grow in their own gardens. The colorful produce is most often displayed on the ground. Other goods, too, are displayed at times on the ground. Killing an animal may be a sacrilege for some, but if the animal died falling off a cliff or was butchered across the border, its meat can just as well be eaten. Meat will be carved before the eyes of the customer by the side of the fruit and vegetable market. But the sight of a dismembered animal thrown on the grass does not necessarily sharpen a tourist's appetite. At restaurants, food is chili pepper hot, but service is always with a smile. Set to dry on roofs or in the field, the But Jolokia is the world's hottest pepper, 400 times hotter than Tabasco sauce. The pepper is used in India in homeopathic preparations for stomach ailments. Most formal education available to Bhutanese students until the 1960s was provided by Buddhist monasteries. Education is now compulsory, and free public schooling is expanding. English is used to teach mathematics, science, and geography. In the 1990s, only a quarter of school-aged children attended classes, and many children still have no access to education. Schools and religious institutions have suffered from poor hygiene. Some of the children living in the rural areas of Bhutan had to walk up to 6 hours to get to school. Some parents are said to have built coarse huts for them to stay near their schools during school week. Archery is the national sport of Bhutan, although its archers have not yet made it beyond the preliminary stages of the Olympic Games. Each village has its own archery range, and every competition starts with a prayer. A national dress code decreed in 1989 defines what can be worn in public during daylight hours. Other than cops and soccer team members, men wear the go, a knee-length robe. Women wear the kira, an ankle-length piece of fabric wrapped and folded around the body, a style that some tourists seem to find attractive enough to try it on themselves. A family's property is controlled in Bhutan by the mother. Inheritance is transferred from mother to daughter or sister. Women have an equal legal, if not social, standing in society. They can vote and run for office. They can also become monks, though few of them do. Girls are expected to take care of their parents in old age. Polygamy has been legal with the consent of the future wives. Women also could, by custom, be married to several husbands, but both customs are gradually dying out. The Bhutanese often paint phalluses on their houses, some with ribbons tied around them, to ward off evil spirits. No housewarming in Bhutan is considered to be complete without a virgin dancing and delivering a basket full of wooden phalluses. In a happily married life, love and sex are inseparable. However, sex is viewed as not conducive to spiritual development. Buddhism does not regard marriage as a religious duty ordained in heaven, but just as a social obligation. Religion is everywhere in Bhutan and difficult to distinguish from politics. The state religion, Lamaistic Mahayana Buddhism, originating in Tibet but with different rituals, teaches that suffering is due to desire. Creeds of Bhutan Buddhism, such as beliefs in spirits that live in trees, rocks, lakes, or mountains, may have derived from Aboriginal traditions. The highest ranked monk in the land is the closest advisor to the king. The maroon robes of the monks are intended as cheap clothes to protect from the weather, mended together from several pieces. Monks traveling from village to village carry portable shrines with doors that open to reveal images and statues of the Buddha and of notable lamas. The mother of the third king of Bhutan, Jigme Dorji Wangchuk, known as the father of modern Bhutan, had a stupa built in Thimphu in his memory in 1974. Unlike other stupas, this one does not enshrine human remains. Only a photograph of the king adorns the entrance hall. The king had put an end to feudalism and slavery, introduced wheeled vehicles into the country, and established a high court and a national assembly before dying in 1972 at the age of 44. The shapes of the components of a stupa, or shrine, represent from bottom to top the five elements of Buddhism: earth, water, fire, air, and space. The prayer flags are in the colors of the same elements: yellow for earth, green for water, red for fire, blue for air, and white for space. The universe of ancient Greeks was made of four of these elements, excluding space. Romans did not have a number for nothingness. White flags, the symbol of nothingness, commemorate a dead person, with 107 flags erected for a man, but only 103 for a woman. A mantra is inscribed in each of the flag's squares that have been sewed together. The flags are placed on a riverside or on the top of a hill, as water and wind would spread the benefits of the mantras and carry sins away. Gigantic wheels, spinning in a clockwise direction, are intended to help the devotions of the spinner reach the ears of the gods. They are seen not only around the dzongs, but also by every river and at many street corners. The mantra of the deity of compassion, Om Mani Padme Hum, is written on paper and inserted in the wheel to increase the impact of the mantra. All locations in Bhutan are sacred, but the hermitage at Tiger's Nest is one of the most sacred. The trek up to Tiger's Nest, the highlight of a trip to Bhutan, starts in the gorgeous Paro Valley from an altitude of about 7,500 feet. Visitors rent mules to climb to an open-air cafe kept by monks across the valley, offering lunch and a perfect view of the hermitage. Who ever heard of a tiger nestling at a spot 10,000 feet above sea level that could only be reached by soaring eagles? But tradition has it that Guru Rinpoche had landed on the back of a tigress at the very sacred Takshang hermitage to fight a demon. It is, of course, even harder to imagine how a hermitage, still inhabited by monks, could have been built at such a location back in 1692. Although it may have been under surveillance from the hills above, the hermitage suffered a major fire 1 year after our visit in 1998. Bhutanese art is similar to the art of Tibet and follows the precepts of Buddhist masters. Each divine being in Bhutanese art is assigned a specific shape, color, and identifying objects, such as lotuses, conch shells, thunderbolts, or even begging bowls. When drawing grotesque demons, their dismembered victims, and other eerie concoctions, the artist has greater freedom of expression. Both monks and peasants produce works in their spare time. They might spend as much as 2 years for a single work. The tourist may find in Bhutan paper artwork, wood carvings, colorful masks, silk paintings, and religious paraphernalia. Open-air displays are small, but the prices are lower than in stores, and tourists can rest assured they have not been mass-produced in China. Bhutan, with its beautiful scenery and traditions, gives a foreigner the impression of witnessing a staged performance. If so, Bhutanese festivals or chechus are plays within plays for the visitor, but an epic performance for the local population. The festivals are religious gatherings in the inner courtyards of dzongs, open to the public on that occasion. On the 10th day of the Buddhist lunar calendar, in one or another of the main dzongs of Bhutan. The festivals are held in honor of Guru Rinpoche, who had brought Buddhism to Bhutan, and dedicated to the deities that protected Drukpa, that is, the Bhutanese people. The most important festival is held inside the dzong of Thimphu, which houses the king's offices and all government departments. Gendarmes discreetly see to it that the spectators remain squatting for the protracted duration of the show. And many of the people arriving at the festival are very tired, some of them having possibly spent days walking to get there. The folk, some coming from spread-out villages, seek merit for the next life by attending the festival. Some spectators arrive at the dzong wearing flamboyant silks, displaying a higher level of wealth than anywhere else in the country. As a result, the spectacle is as much among the public as it is on the stage itself. While the courtyard fills up with the crowds attracted to the festival, the secular authorities watch the spectacle from their office windows overlooking the courtyard. The best places to watch the festival are reserved for the monks in recognition of their sacrifices, especially for those stationed at monasteries high in the mountains. At times, tourists, presumably unaware of the protocol, mingle with the monks, a misdemeanor that spoils a photograph and would be punishable if they were Bhutanese citizens. Young monks certainly enjoy the time they spend at the festival. The young monk preparing to participate in a sham adjusts with a smile his monkey king crown of southern Bhutan lore. Festival dances are accompanied by music played by monks on local instruments. Each dance begins with a fanfare of horns played in pairs using a breathing technique that results in a continuous sound. A dance can last several hours, putting to the test the stamina of the dancers. Sacred Buddhist dances can be traced back to as early as the 8th century, inspired by great masters and saints. The masked dances, or shams, that travel agencies promote as raucous and joyful are first and foremost holy and spiritual events. The barefoot dancers, carrying swords and wearing yellow skirts and animal masks, recreate the legends of Himalayan Buddhism. Their fearsome bearing and their angry faces belie their true compassionate nature. The diverse Bhutan papier-mâché masks are drawn from the traditions of shamanism, village myths, and classical Buddhism. The clothes and masks the dancers and musicians wear depict mythical demons, heroes, princes, princesses, interpreted by men, and commoners. Each costume, mask, and posture of the performers carries a symbolism of its own. The underlying purpose being spiritual, most Buddhist dances are similar to Christian passion plays of the Middle Ages. By performing these dances, the monks bless the onlookers and impart Buddhist teachings to them. Proof that male members dominate the traditional social system even if women control property. Women align by the side of the courtyard. They do not participate in the sacred dances, but sing and move in circles only during intermissions. When watching a festival show, it is easy to let your imagination flow. Jesters distract the crowds with their antics when the religious dances start to grow tedious. The biggest laughs come when the monks rush towards the spectators, brandishing big sticks. Having both amused and frightened them, the monks return among the spectators to demand money, and each monk keeps what he obtains. And the traditions of Bhutan are kept alive as the Thunder Dragon proceeds into the 21st century. The festival celebrations last 2 full days. Thereafter, the Dzong closes its doors to the public, and so do we. Om Mani Padme Hum. Transform your impure body, speech, and mind into the pure, exalted body, speech, and mind of a Buddha.